composers and pieces from 1600 to 1750. The word Baroque has a direct connection to the word Barroco, which in Portuguese means an oddly shaped pearl. The reason for this odd choice of words was the idea of musical critics during the 1800s. They chose the name of the period Baroque because it seemed quite over-exaggerated in comparison to the Romantic period, which took place during the 19th century. The philosophy of the Baroque period often relates to the Renaissance idea of classicism. The composers during this time realized that they could use their music to influence and communicate the emotions of the listener. This is essentially a reinvention of the Greek musical culture because of the true emotion behind the music. The theme of this musical style is simply stated by Claudio Monteverdi, a composer from Italy who taught of a practice in which music could be used to communicate emotion across great distances and cultures. Throughout history, the most well-known composers weren't necessarily writing the form of music that they would choose to compose. Most composers were working for organizations such as the church or the government in order to be able to support themselves. Unlike much of modern music, there are less individual ideas and styles in the music of the past. With this limited creative freedom, the individual can clearly understand the style and musical desires of some of the most powerful institutions of history. An example of this is Johann Sebastian Bach, who received patronage from the Church of Leipzig for his cantatas, or music composed for singers and instruments, usually for religious ceremonies. An importance was placed on the instruments that could play a piece of music during this time period, because most composers wrote music specifically for certain instruments. Brass instruments, such as the trumpet, and string instruments, such as the violin, were used extensively. The contrast between loud and soft was also integrated into Baroque music. This is similar to Baroque art, which also used contrast. What differed the Baroque period from previous musical movements was the use of both melody and harmony in the piece. During the previous musical era, polyphony style was used. This style proved to be too distracting for the type of music that would be produced in the Baroque era. In order to obtain the desired musical feel, composers looked back to the culture of ancient Greece for answers. The answer that was found was monody, which is a single voice with a simplified accompaniment. According to the ancient Greeks, for this musical rhetoric to work there had to be a powerful vocalist. This idea was similar to a very early opera. The Baroque period also introduced the shorthand of basso continuo. The basso continuo was a way to write the melody and the bass line within the music. Some of the instruments used in the Baroque period included the harpsichord, the violin, the clavichord, and the trompe dauphine. Arcangelo Corelli studied musical composition and the violin near Bologna. He worked with the Queen of Sweden and was also very good friends with Cardinal Pietro Ottoboni, who would become the Pope Alexander VIII. He was also one of the most highly regarded instrumental composers of his time period and was accepted in many high aristocratic circles throughout Europe. Claudio Monteverdi was one of the earliest Baroque composers. One of his original patrons was Duke Vincenzio of Mantua, for whom he was appointed official violin player in 1592. He also wrote several books of madrigals, the fifth of which is the most well-known. The fifth book of madrigals also divided music into two practices. The first states that the harmony is superior to the text, but in contrast, the second states that the text is superior to the harmony. This is an example of Claudio Monteverdi. Claudio Monteverdi. Jean-Philippe Rémieux was born in Dijon, France in 1683. He did not gain any real publicity until he moved to Paris in 1722. Most of his works were controversial and led to many debates, including those between the Lullists and the Ramists. Around the year of 1745, he was involved with the king's court and worked with Voltaire on many occasions. At the end of his life, he began to only work on the theory of musical composition instead of actually composing the music. This is an example of Jean-Philippe Rémieux. Jean-Philippe Rémieux. Domenico Scarlatti received his musical education and experience from a school in Naples. He then traveled to Venice with his father, and later went to Rome with George Friedrich Handel, when they had a chance to perform for Cardinal Pietro Ottoboni. He composed mostly sonatas for the keyboard with definite Spanish inspiration. This style is called Iberian Baroque. This is an example of Domenico Scarlatti. Domenico Scarlatti.